The thing that triggered me the most from that meeting was the fact that if you decide not to buy a fishing license and you're gonna cheat the man and be like, oh, he doesn't need my money, and you do get a ticket from all those people, that money that is gotten from that ticket does not go back to the fisheries. I will say this again. If you get a ticket by any law enforcement on the water, none of those funds go directly back to the Department of Wildlife Resources. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia, and Shallow Water Fishing Adventures Baits, online, located in Mount Airy, Maryland.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this belated Monday Night Live. I know that this is not usually the time that we do it, and I kept hoping that we were able to make it happen last night, but then, I think the meeting started at like 4 p.m. for the Black Bass Advisory, and we were there till I think 2 in the morning. It felt like it was a long-ass meeting, which is something I really wanted to bring up like a meeting ago. It's like, it feels like we meet once every month or every year almost, and we do it for like a cram session of half a day. And then somebody else like, oh, I have a good point. It's like, okay, but we'll wait until 2026 and then we'll take care of that. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next meeting, we can be a little bit more regular so we can get everything hammered out in a more efficient pattern. But we have so much crap to talk about that happened in that meeting, a whirlwind of information. And I need a person to help me who's a little bit more eloquent with the words than I am. The man, the myth, the legend, Captain Steve Chaconas. Sir, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I love that introduction that you have with your wife, boat flipping and all that. Remind me when I had a radio show. This is probably before your time. There was a guy named Charles Manson. Are you familiar with Charles Manson? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he was convicted. He was in prison, and Tom Snyder was a talk show host, and he interviewed him, and he said, "So Tom Snyder says, well, Charlie, have you ever taken any drugs?" And he goes, well, I've taken a little bit of marijuana, some cocaine, some PCP, some LSD, some psilocybin, some mescaline, but drugs, I wouldn't take anything that would hurt me. And that's how I introduced my show. But it was a different show, a different type of music, and a long time ago. I don't know where you want to start. You already started. One of the things that we brought up last night, you brought it up. And I jumped right on it. There's the fact that we only meet 4 times a year, and we have agenda items that take up all the discussion time. By the time we got through with the department's discussion on the budget, and then it did. To me, the most important thing last night was listening to Dick Barrick and all those projects that are coming up. That some of them should be redirected for improve, because when a developer asks for permission to build, they always have to provide some kind of they work a deal. And they say, well, if you want to build here and you build a road or you build a tree house or you do this or you do that. So one of the things they were going to do is improve some of the waterways, either the shorelines or make them better fish habitat. And they were, I think, Port Tobacco Creek. And they said they were doing it in Manawilman. So Dick Barrick reads through all this. I mean, I didn't even know where to start when I got that information, but we need to spend more time on that, because that right there was something that the department could take some action on, or at least advise the local politicians on what they should be doing with some of those things. But again, we only meet 4 times a year, and it was poo-pooed? Would you say poo-pooed, or just like
poo-pooed down, basically?
Hammer down? No. That they didn't want to meet more than that. And when I get through these meetings, my wife says, "Why do they have your group? Why is there the Black Bass Advisory Committee? What is its purpose now?" And not sure. I mean, we discuss a lot of things. We raise a lot of questions, and fortunately, we've got Roger Tragasar, who has been around for. Oh, I like that light.
Yeah, thank you.
Reminds me when I was in college. But anyway, they have Roger, who's been around and has a lot of constituents with the Maryland Bass Federation. Scott Sewell. If Scott was leading, I would follow him anywhere. Scott Sewell is he is Mr. Bass conservation. He's also a guy who gets stuff done. He wanted to stock bass, and we see the Maryland DNR. I don't know, their hatcheries. We got a little report on that. Their hatcheries are like mid-century or something like that. They've got those weird clocks on the wall, and they got old furniture and stuff. So they can only produce 3-inch fry, but they can produce a lot of them. And so they put them in a lot of places, and they go, all right, let's see how many of them make it. And we don't know. Somebody asked on Facebook today when Maryland DNR stocks, and I should have asked Joe Love this last night. When they stock 3-inch bass, the department is trying to put them in places where they would have a good chance of not only surviving, but avoiding predators. So heavy SAVs, stuff like that. But have they done any studies to see how many of those survive? And my guess is it wouldn't show up for a couple of years, because they'd have to do a few surveys. They'd have to go through a few survey cycles and see what it's done to that year class. So they might look at, they know last year's year class, and then they would say, okay, the next year, which is this year's year class, how big did it actually get? And you wouldn't know that for maybe a year or two with the surveys that they do, because they don't usually shock up a whole lot of small fish when they're doing that. So they are doing what they can, but that came up last night too, that their hatcheries are way out of date. And which brings us to I'm not going according to the agenda, but one of the things that they were talking about last night is the conservation fund. And last week, Thomas sent me an email. He said, "Oh, you're leading the discussion on the conservation fund." And I'm like, well, that wasn't my baby. That was Roger and Scott. And that was something we talked about this. I think I talked about in the meeting last night. I think we talked about it 10 or 12 years ago, where we thought about doing it. And Scott, and I got to give Joe Love credit too, because Scott Sewell and Roger really pushed. I mean, it's hard to get stuff through legislation so that they can, pass a bill that says that you have the opportunity to make a donation when you buy a fishing license. It was never discussed where that money specifically was going to go to, but all of a sudden last week, when we were told how much money we had raised with this thing, or last month or meeting, whatever it was only like about $500. And then last night they had $2,700, and then Fishing the DMV stepped up and donated $1,000. So to what, you might ask? Well, there's things called bead filters, and I'm not really up on what they do, but what they end up doing is making a hatchery capable of producing bigger fish through a better filtration, maybe keeps them alive longer, makes them healthier, whatever. So instead of stocking 3-inch bass, they're able to stock 6 to 8-inch bass.
Improves your crop.
It does. It's now, whatever the survival of 3-inch bass is, you got to think that survival of a 6 or 8-inch bass is much, much better. I mean, they're better equipped to survive, and they will survive.
No, 100%. And I think, guys, I actually have the PowerPoint up right here, and I'm trying to even think about where we start with this. And I think, let's just get into it. So tear the Band-Aid off, because I've been thinking about how I bring this up, and I really could not, even after sleeping on it. The fishing licenses are going to be going up, specifically the people that do not live in Maryland. They're running a massive deficit, and based on what they just said, which was inflation, everything's going up. I mean, fish feed. I like this slide. I think anyone can look at this to be like the cost of fish feed in 06 versus 2024. Just a very little example there. They will be raising the fees to be able to make the budget meet, plain and simple. And I believe, and Steve, I could be wrong, they're going to start with the out-of-staters first before they hit the residents, which when you look at the states surrounding it, Maryland has this jewel of the Tidal Potomac and the Upper Bay. But it's such a small state that has to run it. It's not like Texas with Lake Fork, and you have this massive GDP to be able to throw at these places. It's a very small state, and it has the cheapest fishing license out of the 4 or 5 states that surround it, which is insane.
Yeah. The way the state gets funding is they get it through government, and the government, there's an excise tax and legislation. I can't remember when it was passed, but it was called the Wallop-Roe legislation, which is an excise tax on anything fishing related, fishing line, fishing hooks, anything boating and fishing. And it's meant to promote fishing. And some of it is given to states and is based on how many licenses they sell. So they get a portion of that. They get a couple other government funds too for different programs. But the three areas that they can control are the cost of fishing licenses, but they can also control how many people they have working for them. So one of the options would be, okay, to save money. And when you get to that other slide, it's pretty interesting how they, that's the one about the, how the, well, yeah, so that's remained constant. Those funds have pretty much, they had a spike during COVID. Those are the 2020 and 2021. They had a spike during COVID where they got more people fishing, more people buying fishing licenses. So then they go back to where they should be. And so the funds have stayed static, but it sounds to me like adding more programs or enhancing programs, expanding programs, and staff. People are pretty expensive. The first thing that most businesses cut, payroll. You cut payroll, you make money. It was said, and I hate to see people lose their jobs, but I haven't looked at all the numbers. I'm kind of a numbers cruncher. I'd have to look at it and see exactly what's being spent. Are there any redundancies? So the options were cut staff, cut programs, or increase. The only place they can increase is revenue from fishing licenses. So what they've been doing every year that these have remained static, their expenses have gone up because of inflation, and they have been basically taking from their reserve funds. Well, at the rate that they're going, those reserve funds are going to be depleted, I think, in 2027.
2027.
Fiscal 27, right. They're going to be, they're going to be upside down. They're going to have depleted them entirely, and they're going to be upside down in that. And that would be, and their projected revenue is based on current revenue. So that may go up a little bit, but it's not going to go up enough. They're going to have to do something. If just based on this year alone, 600,000 for this fiscal 24. So that's a lot. And, the point that in fact, this was because I read the stuff. When I get it, I open it up and I read it. So I read this whole presentation before the meeting. So when the meeting was started and they said, hey, we got this and that, the budget. And I said, okay, well, Pennsylvania is, they're paying practically nothing to come here compared to what they pay for their fishing licenses. They're coming here out of state. They're getting a heck of a deal. They come here during the spawn because Pennsylvania is closed during the spawn. They want to protect their fisheries. So what do? Everybody from Pennsylvania goes to the Upper Bay into the Potomac River. Those are tidal, and we're talking about freshwater. But a license is a license, and if you're looking to cover a budget shortfall, that's the elephant in the room. That's where you're going to see your biggest revenue growth are in the areas that are in the Upper Bay, where people come into that bass tournaments, flocking in to do that. And it's from a state, heck, guys, sorry, Pennsylvania guys, but your state has chosen to force you to come to Maryland to fish the Potomac in the Upper Bay, and you're going to have to pay the price. And the surprising thing, and we were talking before this went on, I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she's a finance person. And I said, and the funny thing was when I asked, well, how much do you have to raise the licenses to cover this? And it was like, anybody look at that? No, nobody look. So it was like, that wasn't even, that should have been, I think, in this presentation as well. Like, if we raise it this much, but I think maybe in all fairness, they're trying to get two representatives from the Black Bass Advisory Committee, Sportfish, and probably some other organizations, all these Maryland groups based out of Maryland residents. They wanted Maryland residents, which again, I think is probably a good idea. I wouldn't want somebody from Maryland telling me, how much I'm going to pay for a Virginia fishing license or a West Virginia fishing license. So they're going to let those people get together and decide on this. I think they missed an opportunity, though, with us.
I do think it's interesting when you deal with the Potomac River, and let's just go. And I know this wasn't the gist of last night's conversation, but Virginia shares such a big border with the tidal Potomac. Leesylvania has so many tournaments going out of there. And from a Maryland perspective, if I got in their head, why couldn't Virginia help flip the bill is not the right word, but for lack of a better vocabulary tonight, help with the cost when Virginia is so much bigger and they get so much use out of the river themselves?
Well, that would be part of raising the out-of-state license. But they can't do that with Virginia because the licenses reciprocate. So that whatever the Virginia license is, $15 covers them in Maryland, and Maryland gets zippo from a Virginia angler. They get nothing.
Which is kind of my point. So if I'm in Pennsylvania, right, I'd be like, oh, I'll just go to Virginia, get that license, and I'll fish from there to the Potomac. Boom, workaround.
Yep, there you go. And then they have a license to cover them in Virginia too. I don't think that it would cover them in the Upper Bay, but we're focusing on the Potomac, and that's by the way, a little sidebar here. I've developed a new jig head, and I'm going to show this to everybody. It's not showing. You can't see it, can you? It's in my hand. It's in my hand. Now, which hand's it in?
Ooh.
Okay, good. I'll show you this technique for fishing a Senko, especially this time of the year, especially if you're fishing a little bit deeper water. But it works really good in grass and works good on wood, and it skips really well. But I'll show this jig head. You just got to remind me. I've got it in my hand. But I will show it later.
Let everyone in the comments section make sure you remind us to show off this mythical jig head. So yeah, we got expenses. It's racking up. They're going to be raising the fees. That's going to be happening potentially in the future. Here was the big thing that for me, I know we both had our hot takes, or the things that triggered us the most. The thing that triggered me the most from that meeting was the fact that if you decide not to buy a fishing license and you're gonna cheat the man and be like, oh, he doesn't need my money, and you do get a ticket from all those people, that money that is gotten from that ticket does not go back to the fisheries. I will say this again. If you get a ticket by any law enforcement on the water, none of those funds go directly back to the Department of Wildlife Resources.
Yeah.
Explain that.
I asked that question. I go, oh, by the way, where's this money go? And I got, again, one of those like, hey, anybody, do we have a book on that? Can someone look that? Google that. I was shocked, and Thomas was too. I think both of us, lit up the screen on that one. It was like, well, wait a minute, where does it go? We think it goes to the general fund. I go, oh, it vaporizes. There should be some, at least the portion that they would have paid for a fishing license, at least that, we think that. And then, of course, I'm sure the fines are more than it would cost for a fishing license. So why is it that way? And that would be something I would push for. But see, that would take more work. That would take a lot of work because that's a legislative thing. And then it's also the same people that would have to support you are the ones who are getting that money. So you would go, look, Mr. Delegate, we'd like to have that money go back to the fisheries.
No, I agree. And then, Steve just dropped because of his connection.
To really, spend money any way that I want, But I don't know that would get support, but shocked me.
And that's just the logical hole in their whole logic is, okay, you want to raise the fees on something. Okay, let's just say you agree with that. Cool. But then you can't enforce it. Then it's not going to work, right?
Well, when you do enforce it, the natural resource, the NRP, Natural Resource Police, they would be the ones who would enforce it. Because it came up where I said, well, are they enforcing this, thinking that the money would go to them? And then it came out that it wasn't. But yeah, you would think that some of it would at least go to, I don't know, the NRP is probably on a different budget. I didn't see that anywhere in this that they support NRP, but they've grown. They added a lot more officers in the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of people fishing from the shore. They could walk through Leesylvania, or not Leesylvania, Smallwood, any of the other places where people fish from the bank, or even out on the water. I don't know that. I'd like to know the stats on that, how many people they stop on the water don't have fishing licenses. But I would pretty much think that people that are fishing from the bank are the ones that are the biggest culprits, not fishing with a license. But, again, they've got 3 places, and now, to me, they've got 4. They've got an additional source of revenue that they need to go after.
And this is the interesting thing here for everyone that is listening on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. So this is what the slide that was sent to us, that a Virginia license is $23. Pennsylvania is $27. West Virginia is $19. If you're going for a residential trout stamp, it is $5 in Maryland, this is actually what blew me away. I thought the trout for residential would be way freaking higher, but a resident trout stamp is $5 in Maryland. A resident Virginia trout stamp is $23. A resident Pennsylvania is $14.97, and then a resident West Virginia license is $10. How the hell is it $5 in 2024? I mean, it's a steal, but it's just like, damn.
Right, the fish food was one of the big, like, it had a 39% increase,
Yep.
over the past few years. So yeah, that's that's one of those things that makes you go, huh? And then when you look at the non-resident, non-title, I think non-resident, non-title, for Maryland resident, Maryland charges $30, Virginia's $47. I mean, meet somewhere in the middle. It's $61. It's like almost double. It is double in Pennsylvania. And in West Virginia, it's close to being double too, because there is that little add-on fee they have. There's just like $47, almost $50 for that non-resident annual license. And so they're way behind. And keep in mind too, if you look at the dates when they last raised these prices for Maryland anyway, 2007 was the last time they raised it for that. And your resident trout stamp goes back to before you were born. It was 1992. Mm-hmm. That was before you were born, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it's insane to me. Okay, I mean, one other thing is, all these states that you're dealing with, Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, guys, they're massive. They're bigger states. They have more people that are in it. This is not earth-shattering news. I'm just shocked that Maryland was so far behind in this front, I guess. Like, I don't know. You'd think that it would, in my opinion, it would be logical sense that maybe Maryland's license fees were more expensive than the other states because it's a smaller state. Like, that's how my brain works. So, I don't know. I was shocked about that. And we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah.
Wholesaling,
yeah. So that's always that's been an issue, and Captain George Martin and I worked on this. George was wonderful, dragged me down to the VMRC a few times. So last night, the Department of Natural Resources in Maryland decided to invite the new executive director of the Potomac River Fisheries Commission. So quick little history. Potomac River Fisheries Commission was set up to settle the commercial fishing wars between Virginia and Maryland. So they regulate commercial fishing. They also regulate guides, that you have to have a Potomac River Fishery Commission guide license, not because you're fishing in their waters. Their waters are basically the main stem of the Potomac, but because you're carrying passengers through their water. So you have to have their guide license. So we had the new director there. And I guess, to be fair, and I try to be fair, I try to use expressions like, to be fair, with all due respect, bless your heart. I try to use those. I see him in the movies a lot, and it seems to help. But the guy was new. His name's Ron Owens, and he's new. And I asked him, I said, well, we've had a lot of issues with hull seining. It's a commercial method of fishing. And the issues are that they're plying their craft during the spawn, also during the time when SAVs, which is subaquatic vegetation, when those grasses, especially milfoil, which we like, milfoil is emerging, and they're dragging these nets through there. So he goes, I wasn't aware of that. He starts taking notes. I'll get back to you. And I also asked him about, recreational fishing and guide fishing representation on the Potomac River Fisheries Commission board. We don't seem to have much representation, and I've got a volunteer for him, Captain Chris Johnson. Mm-hmm. I talk to him all the time, and he's been, I wouldn't say confronted, I'd say interfered with while he's on a guide trip. that he's guiding somewhere, and all of a sudden they decide, hey, get out of the way, you're right where we want to drag our nets through. Well, Chris, bass fishing, we don't just pull up, make 2 casts and leave, so Chris had been there for a while, and they decided to kind of shove him off, and we've talked about all this, and he would be a good board member for you because he represents a lot of different groups of people. So he said he would do that. But the surprise came when they had Brandon Malik. Brandon Malik is a commercial fisherman, and he conducts hull seining operations on, I guess, some of the rivers close to Baltimore.
Yeah, up.
So we're listening to him, and he's telling us, how they do it. He sounded like a really nice guy. And I mean, these, don't get me wrong. These people work harder than anybody for their money, and they're just like farmers. They're at the will of the weather and the nature, and they work. Okay, what we're having though is a little bit of a clash between what they do and what we do. And what we do is we bass fish. Now, if you're a Maryland resident, Virginia resident, whoever you are, and you're fishing in Maryland, you cannot catch bass smaller than 15 inches. Everything has to be over 15 inches during the spawn. That's basically March 15 to June 15. So they have a special regulation for that period of time, but not for the hull seiners. So when Malik was here and he was talking to us last night, he's talking about, oh yeah, we do our nets and we, this, and then I decided to, I thought, I was like, I'm missing something here. Something is not adding up. So I said, well, what fish do you fish for? And he told me, and it wasn't blue cat. It was something else.
Carp and something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm like, okay, that's good. And I said, and he said that the water was cold and they had to get in the water. And I'm like, well, what time of year do you do this? He goes, oh, we start September and we're done by the end of December. And I'm like, well, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned a phrase that I wasn't really familiar with. It was apples and something. He was apples and oranges. I go, yeah, I think it was that. It was apples and grapefruit. I said, this is apples and peaches here, because we don't really care what hull seiners do from December, September, October, November, December. We don't care what they do. The grasses are as thick as they're going to be. They won't be able to do anything in those grasses anyway. And we don't really care. But when they're dragging nets, and by the way, I asked Malik, I said, how long are your nets? He said, about 400 feet. I said, do you know how long the nets are they use on the Potomac? He said, about 600. I said, no, they're 1,000 feet. They're 1,000 feet. And I said, how tall are your nets? He said, they're about 4 or 5 feet. And I said, well, do you know how tall the nets are for the ones hull seining on the Potomac? No, I said, they're 10 feet. So they're 10 feet tall, 1,000 feet long. They stake the net to the shoreline, they drag it out, and they bring it back in, and they harness all those fish in one little pocket in this net. And the purpose of our meetings with them is to try to get some kind of compromise, because they have killed thousands of fish. And I'm going to say every year that I can remember, where we've had major fish kills because they pen all these fish up, and then they go like, well, we've loaded our boat with fish, but we're not going to let the rest of them go. We'll come back tomorrow. Oh, well, we couldn't come back tomorrow, so we came back 3 days later. When they open up the pen, all the dead fish start to be washed along the shore. And the only reason, oops, did I just show you that jig? The only reason that anything is being done, or it's even mentioned, is because the homeowners on the shore don't like the stinking smell of rotting fish and the rats and everything else that comes with it. So it gets mentioned, and then they go, well, we're sorry. We won't let it happen again. And everybody in the department goes, that's okay with me. Is it okay with you? It's okay. Everybody's okay with that. So that's where we were. What surprises me is, had we not fortunately dug a little bit deeper, we would have based our opinion on hull seining on what this really nice man from Baltimore area was saying about his operation, without realizing that it's not what we're talking about. It's not the same thing. And I know Rob Greik has sent me pictures. A lot of fishermen from Virginia, Maryland have called me. And I say, guys, let me tell you, you've got a pretty big audience, Thomas. I want all of your people who fish the Potomac, Tidal Potomac River. When you see hull seining operations, I want you to take pictures and save them or send them to me. Okay. nationalbass@aol.com. Pretty easy. Just nationalbass@aol.com. Send me a copy of the pictures. Give me a few details. If they interfered with your fishing, if they were fishing, where they were fishing, how deep it was where they were fishing. Did you see dead fish? Did you see grass being ripped up? Because one of the directors, when I brought this up about 6 or 7 years ago, one of the directors go, well, we can't just go, that's anecdotal. And I said, well, it's common sense. He goes, well, we don't use common sense in this department. I said, yeah, I kind of learned that, but Joe Love tried to do a study where he tried to drag through an area to see what would happen. And it was very hard because they didn't really have the equipment to do it. But he tried to do a study, so at least we could say, look what happens when you drag a net through these areas. It's a long battle. The only thing we can hope for is that their nets eventually rot and if through old age they decide it's not worth it, because apparently it's a very difficult procedure and the nets are pretty expensive and hard to maintain. So maybe at some point they'll just cease and desist because of attrition. But it was very frustrating last night to once again see a presentation that, I'm starting to become a little bit, I'm not saying suspicious, but I really, and and if I was really vindictive, I'd want to know who set that up, whose idea it was to bring those people in without asking the questions that I asked. Tell me about your, oh, wait a minute, we're just wasting the committee's time listening to another. They might as well have been from Canada, as far as I was concerned last night. But I need eyes and ears out there, guys. We can't let this go, because right now it's not a big deal. The grasses are pretty thick. We're not fishing the same spawning areas that we were March, April, May, and into June. So what happens is bass fishermen forget until March, April, May, June. Then they get mad and what are they doing here? And they're killing fish and they're looking, oh, I got pictures of all these dead fish. Well, get them. Stay on top of this. Let's do.
Fishing the DMV has big plans for the future. To get there, I need your help. We are only 3 Patreon supporters away from our next major milestone. Only 3 more individuals need to sign up. For $6 a month, which is less than a pack of Cincos or a jackhammer chatterbait, all Patreon supporters will receive 5% off their orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 20% off their orders to Shallow Water Fishing Adventures Tackle, 10% off their orders to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off their orders to Catoctin Creek Rods. You'll also gain access to our private Facebook group community, members-only content and videos, monthly prize giveaways, and so much more. Again, we only need 3 more individuals to hit our next major milestone. Once this major milestone is hit, we will announce our big party, our Patreon meetup, with a ton of special guests, seminar speakers, so much more this summer that will only be available for people who are Patreon members to go to. And we'll also maybe have a couple more special surprises to announce then. For more information, link in the episode description down below. Thank you so much. I 100% agree. And I mean, guys, that was pretty much in a nutshell what we deliberated on for the most part last night. There was something else I wanted to bring up too. And then guys, I know everyone in the comment section is going to get feverish here. If you have a fishing question, feel free to put it in the comment section. We'll get all those answered. I just want to get through kind of the educational stuff first before we get into the fun stuff. There was a Facebook post about a day ago talking about the stocking that happened. And Steve, like Captain America at the end of Endgame, just stood on a hill. And I think you answered every damn person. I actually enjoyed this while I was on the crapper today, just going through some of these comments that people had. Blue cats are the worst. Why are you stalking largemouth? That was a hot comment section. Woo!
It was, with I'm on this committee and I got involved and I'm in the media. You guys might read some of my pieces in Woods and Waters. And by the way, I've got a piece coming out on women fishing tournaments, why they don't win more tournaments. And the answer will surprise you. But anyway, I like this stuff. I like to know what's going on. I've been in the media for about 30 years. And I've been a White House correspondent. I've interviewed presidents and, so I've done all this stuff. And I thought it was pretty cool to get involved in this committee. but also you get to meet and you see the heart of these people. I know that Joe Love and most of the people I've met with Maryland DNR, they love their jobs, they love their constituents, and they love making fishing fun. And when I see people just totally disrespecting them and, going after them saying, oh, this is a waste of time, it's all they have the money for. 3-inch fish is better than nothing. Oh, they just start. No, they've been doing this for, I remember going back to Don Cosden, and probably nobody listening or watching knows who Don Cosden was, but I think he was kind of like Joe Love's predecessor. Mm-hmm. And he, he told me, I'd say, well, you guys stock? He goes, all the time. We're stocking every year. They take spawning fish out of the Potomac. They let them spawn out. They return the fish to the Potomac along with, some of the 3-inch fish that they get, by the end of the season. And it's a hard thing to do. I also remind people that while this may increase the numbers, we don't know how well it's going to work down the line. You have to wait for several surveys to see how these 3-inch fish do every year. But tournament anglers, especially, you guys are catching the biggest fish in the system. Okay. Mm-hmm. You're putting them in a live well. You're culling them out here and there. You're dragging them up and down the river. Maybe they're in your live well for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. You get back, you stand away in line with your bag. You get on the stage, they dump the water, they weigh the fish, they put them back in the bag, and then you take them down and dump them in the river, and they all swim away except for 20% of them. 20% of them will probably die within a few days, and it's not good, and it's called delayed mortality. You have tournament mortality, which guys like Ed Dustin and Bob Petty are two big tournament organizers, and they do a really good job making sure that they get their fish through. They do everything they can to make sure the fish make it through the weigh-in process. But there's stuff that happens to those fish during the tournament day that by the time they get there, it's already too late. They're dying. We don't know it. They move a little bit. They're still alive. 5 alive. Got them alive. You put them in. 20% of those. That's 1 out of every 5 fish. Those are the 5 biggest fish that are being caught. I don't know what the answer is, but don't complain when you go like, man, fishing used to be so good. We used to catch 5 5-pounders every time we went out. Well, those 5-pounders aren't around anymore. So now the only way to fix that, and I'm probably, is it appropriate when you're talking fishing to say opening a can of worms? Can you say that? Is that okay to say that?
Yeah, I think that's okay. And honestly, I want to read some of these comments because I need to let's see. Let's stock limit employed another day. I've lost respect for your program built from conjecture and more than fact and science. What a good way to waste taxpayers' money feeding snakeheads and the blue cats. So the science is settled. John Odenkirk has talked about this a lot. Supplemental stocking does work. I think we can have the argument whether it should be a 6 to 8 inch or a 1 to 3 inch. We can have that argument, but it does work. It factually works. Look at Virginia and what they've done. So,
right. And I was going to bring up the F word, F1s. Mm-hmm. So I get that a lot too. The concerned bass anglers of Virginia, and I'm so bad with how long ago things happened because it seems like just yesterday I was in high school, I think. But they pushed because the James River was used to be a really good fishery, and then all of a sudden it wasn't, and now all of a sudden it's the best. They started stocking F1s. Now, F1s are Florida strain bass. They cost a lot more money. We were running those figures last night, weren't we, Thomas?
Yep.
Yep, and they're almost a couple bucks more per fish. So that's the good news. The bad news is they don't reproduce. They grow very fast. They get very big. So they're really good. Like when you look at year classes. So let's go with a 5-year-old bass. Let's say it weighs 5 pounds. A 4-year-old bass, let's say weighs 4, 3, 3, 2, and 1.
Doesn't. The genetics don't transfer. The bulk doesn't transfer.
So, but the populations, you start off with that big 1-year-old population is pretty big. And then the next year it's a little smaller. The next year it's a little smaller and smaller. Fish get older, they die, they get eaten by other, fish or birds or whatever, or through predation, consumption. So you lose a lot. Tournament angling, you lose a lot. So when you look at these surveys and you say, oh, okay, well, we used to have a pretty good, ratio of 3-pounders to 4-pounders. It was pretty good. So we'll put F1s in, and they'll fill out that 3-year-old fish class. They'll fill out the 4, and they'll fill out the 5, and then they'll become the big fish in the system. And because of catch and release, they'll stick around for a while, but they do not pass that gene on to other generations. So what you have is what you have. So it's a constant budget issue that they have to deal with. But Virginia's done that. Now, concerned bass anglers raise their own money, and that's how they got it started. And Odenkirk will be the first one to say, I didn't think it would work. I'll eat my words. It works. And he, that's, what makes John a great guy is that, he came out and said, hey, it works. Lake Anna, I think they're doing
Smith
something. Smith Mountain. Yeah. So those things will work, but they, I don't know. I guess they will survive in the Potomac River. I don't see why they wouldn't. But again, you're talking cost. The question I would have that I need to ask Joe Love is, could the hatcheries produce F1s? Could they get F1s and spawn them in their hatcheries and use that stock?
And I would also like to add, to make this clear to everyone listening, the state will still let you, if you are a private individual that for some reason has a ton of money that they want to burn, and you say, I want to go stock F1s, they would be more than reasonable figuring out how to do that. They're not against an individual with private funds. This is their funds, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Steve? How they want to use their money.
Exactly.
So that's where we're trying to figure out.
Scott Sewell did. I forgot the numbers. It's like incredible number of fish that he stocked last year, 700, 12 to 14 inch fish. And, he did that all through donations and all his legwork where he went out with his hand out and said, hey, we want to make fishing better and we'd like you to sponsor this. Then I think he got the DNR to help them move the fish around so they could put them in different places, and he picked the places because the DNR tends to say like, well, we think they should go here, where the fishermen go, no, they should go there. And I would go with most of the fishermen on where the fish should go, even though the DNR, does their surveys and they know more statistically what's going on.
One thing that I saw a lot in that comment section feed was, why not you stock certain parts of the Upper Bay? And based on my knowledge, and it's not as great as yours, if you stock them in a certain creek, like Middle River, where if you pull a fish out of Middle River, there's not a great chance it's going back to Middle River if it goes up north. So I could see from their minds, it's like, why do you want us to stock something where as soon as a tournament comes through, they'll all get cleaned out of there? And whether you agree with that, it is a logical argument versus if you dump them in Mattawoman, that's where they're just going to be. It's good habitat. It's not a bad spot. I don't know. I don't know about that.
Well, when fishermen stop catching fish someplace, they catch them somewhere else. And Nanjamoy used to be a real hot spot. Everybody wanted to go there. Skeet Reese won a Bassmaster tournament in there. Again, time reference, I have no idea, 10, 15 years ago. When his hair was really blonde back then. But he did real well back there, and a lot of people went in there. A couple of years before that, Denny Brower did real well in Little Hunting Creek. And, through a lot of publicity, Little Hunting Creek became a hot spot. When the fish are gone or there aren't as many, think about this, they're not gone. Okay. They're just not as many there. And we try to fish in places where there are a lot of fish, so we have a better chance of catching them. If you fish in a place that's got 2 fish or a place that's got 200 fish, I think even Thomas could catch them if they're in, a place that has 200. Well, you're the right bait. If you use my secret new jig, you could do that. Ooh. Yeah. But the stocking thing is statistically, Maryland or Virginia running their surveys. And one of the things that's a little bit of a disappointment, I should bring this back up again. I worked very hard because Maryland did their surveys a few years back, 5-6 years back, and said, oh, the river's terrible. It's dying there. We don't have any fish there. We gotta do something. We gotta change limits and restrict fishing somehow. And I go, whoa. Virginia, Odenkirk says his surveys, there are bass everywhere. They're loaded. They're better and bigger than ever. Steve, this is like unbelievable. DC was going, yeah, they're really good. Then I started to look at their methodology. Well, Maryland was shocking in the fall. Well, what happens in the river in the fall? You got grass that's so thick. And if you're shocking, you're not being effective. Odenkirk shocks in the spring. DC shocks several times during the year, and so they get a pretty good average. So I said, why don't the 3 jurisdictions get together, share their information? Well, you get 3 scientists in a room, and they're all scientists / mathematicians, statisticians, and they all go, well, you need to take the this of that and the sigma of that, and well, anyway, they came up with a formula that they could all participate in, and then COVID hit, and they just they didn't want to be in the same room together, and I don't know where that all went, but that was a really good idea. If you're going to do any type of fisheries management, especially for those guys on those Facebook threads, guys, you really need to understand how decisions are made on these things. You see a Facebook post and somebody has like 5 or 6 bass laid out and they're dead, and they're going, yeah, boy, these are going to be good to eat. And it turns the stomach of thousands of guys. You don't eat my bass. Why do you eat? Well, you need to. You need to eat some of them, because they reproduce like rabbits.
And this is something else that I saw in the comment section too about all the bass dying. And guys, I'm gonna get to your comments here in a minute too. Be very careful about what you complain about, because usually the reaction you don't want, because all of a sudden you're like Pennsylvania is like, listen, you don't want to fish during the spawn. It's bad for them. So we're going to take that away. Cool. Then, okay, well now the water temperature is up. So you're not allowed to bass fish either. And then all of a sudden you can't bass fish from March till September. Poof, it's gone. And so it sucks, but what's the cure? Are we trying to get to absolute zero mortality? Because if you want that, you're not allowed to fish anymore.
That's like, exactly.
Where are we trying to get with this? It sucks. I hate seeing dead fish, but what's a statistical amount that's you got to grit it and just deal with it.
Yeah. And there is that, because the toughest thing is that we practice catch and release, and we do a pretty damn good job of it. So nobody is keeping largemouth bass. But the few that we see that are dying, it turns the stomach. And Joe Love doesn't like seeing dead fish. I guarantee you that. He and I've talked about this many times. Neither one of us likes it. I mean, I've been bass fishing probably longer than any of you guys ever know. I've been doing it since the early '60s, and using plastic worms. Grew up in Alabama. You either played baseball or you bass fished, and I was lucky. I did a little bit of both. Not as good as Thomas, but I did the bass fishing thing. But we try to protect them. Probably overprotect them, but we lose focus of the thing that we really need to protect, and that's our bigger fish. Okay, we need to do that. We also need to understand that it's a moving target, that because the populations can grow so fast with a good year, a good spawn, a good spring, everything's good, and then all of a sudden you have tons of fish. Well, guess what? That's like you going to your favorite fried chicken place on a Friday night, and they just bring out a new batch of fried thighs, and you're ready to get in line, and all of a sudden a bus of tourists shows up. You don't want that, and that's what happens when we start to grow all these fish. And that's sort of people were saying, oh, it's blue cat food and snakehead food. Well, maybe, but people are harvesting blue cats now, and people are harvesting snakeheads now. That's something we didn't have to do before. So things do change.
And I will defend the snakehead. I've spent way too much time around Odenkirk and these people. It did not have the same effect on the river that the blue cats did. I think most of us can agree blue cats were way worse.
Yes, we can agree on that. But I will tell you this, and I was in the middle of the discussion between John and Joe, where John said that, and it's true. I mean, it's a fact. Right now, snakeheads, not the problem we thought they'd be. But you also look and you go, wait a minute, how many tens of thousands of these things did we kill? How many? I mean, it was catch and kill when these things came out. Everybody, every tournament fisherman, every recreational angler, Bass Pro Shops had a bounty for a while, until this one guy brought in, like 200 of them, where he'd found some that had spawned, and he brought them all in, expected a $25 gift certificate for all of it. Poor Alan Ellis was the promotions manager, and he went, but you broke a rule. You right there, it says you can't snag them, and he snagged them. And anyway, so we killed a lot of them. Had we not killed those fish, where would we be now? And where would we be had bow fishing I mean, there's no catch and release with bow fishing. Those guys are out there pretty much every night.
You're right. There's no catch and release.
It's not like, kind of like deer hunting. It's not like, oh, yeah, nice shot. Let the deer go. No, it's not happening.
And it's not something that we're going to get. I'm going to try to get Apex on to talk about that because I think it's interesting with the groups I've talked to. I could see it.
By the way, Apex Predators, if you guys are looking for a quality and professional group, those guys are top notch. They know what they're doing and they're very professional.
I had a group that I was trying to get on the show from the Rappahannock area. They didn't want to come on, but they said people think bow fishermen, we just want to eradicate all the snakehead and the blue cats. The problem is if we did that, we'd be out of business. We want to harvest them, but we also see them as a resource. And that got me thinking. I could definitely see, at least in Virginia, this is becoming a thing where people want to travel to Virginia to catch these stupid things. And is that a money-making opportunity where they're like, hey, listen, this is like an elk. You got to pay a snakehead stamp, $30 or whatever. I don't know.
When they first came out, when we first started catching snakeheads, I had a guy come here from England. He fished with me like 3 or 4 times, and we were always I said, I think I've got the spawn narrowed down. And if you've ever seen snakeheads spawn, they kind of like, roll all over each other, and then they're totally oblivious to everything going on. And so I would trap them back in these little corners of creeks and put the power poles down and just cast everything at them. And I remember I had this English guy, and he'd throw a lure at them. They'd kind of move out of the way, and he'd throw it again. And I go, here, try this one. I give him a different rod. And we had rods that looked like pixie sticks all over the deck of the boat. And this guy, you know what pixie sticks are?
Oh, I know what pixie sticks are, yes.
So anyway, we tried it. We tried everything. And finally, one day it was like, he goes, well, let's just go fishing for bass. We're not catching snakeheads. And then he caught his snakehead. But he traveled from England to come here to fish for him. And there is, there is a market for it. And I think the kayak guys, they're the ones that are really consistently nailing them. There are very few. It's hard as a guide in a bass boat to go to where you need to go to target snakeheads. What I do is I go and I say, well, we'll try to target snakeheads in the morning, and then if we get some, or the best tide, whatever the best tide is, and then we'll fish for bass. And so we'll do that, or it's location. I'll go to certain places to try to target the snakeheads, and then that. But it is turning into something that's become very popular. And like I said, the guys with Apex, they took out, and I think you'd have to ask them the story, but there was a well-known chef who wanted to catch a snakehead. So he called me up and he goes or his producer did, said, yeah, well, can you guarantee that we'll catch a snakehead? And I said, well, I tell you what, I don't think we're going to do much because I can't guarantee what I don't know. I don't know. I said, I would guarantee that I have a better chance of catching a snakehead than most other people, but I can't guarantee with your skills. I don't know what your skills are. I don't know if you can do it. I don't know if you can cast. I don't know anything. And so I said, why don't you go with these guys that do bow fishing? So I asked him later on, I said, how'd he do? And they showed the video. It's a skill to hit it. When you bow fish, it's a skill. And by the way, folks, it's not bow hunting. It is bow fishing. As Thomas has said, it's bow fishing. Bow hunting is something I think that's done on land, but bow fishing is a legal form of fishing. It's in the code in Virginia and Maryland. It is specifically for certain species. I think blue cat, carp, and gar, and of course snakeheads.
We got a 2-parter here from a Patreon supporter who also does fish breeding too, by the way. Here's the first part. From an aquarium and fish breeding standpoint, I can see why stocking more smaller fish will work way better through tough times. And the second part of that is it works by getting more fish in there. You increase the chances of a dominant, strong genetic bass. It's an investment, not a quick fix. I like that idea, though. That makes a whole lot of sense because that's, we're not at that point where we're out of fish. Like I've told the people, I said, look, 3 inches, that's what we can afford right now. But 10,000 of them, I think that's the number that Maryland stocked. Your odds of producing, as I think his name is Victor, what he said was true, that you get a lot of people out there that think that it's a waste of time, but those fish will survive. They'll develop in that specific habitat that they were released in, which the DNRs decided has been a better chance of them surviving in those kind of habitat, like grassy areas. Yeah, and again, guys, these numbers I think are from a couple of years ago on the website. It's just to give people an idea, but for the people that are listening on Apple and Spotify, so $1.50 for 10,000 is 15 grand. It's $6.50 for a 6 to 8 inch F1. That's for 10,000. That's $65,000. That's I get it when you just say in the comment section like, why don't they just stock something more? Yes, they probably want to. If money was unlimited, I don't think Joe Love would be like, I'm still going to stock a 1 to 3 incher if I had $1 billion. I'm 100% sure he'd be okay with a bigger one. It's money. It is.
Yeah.
It's depressing.
And resources too. As we saw last night, the hatcheries, I think the most recent one was built in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So the technology and I guess the condition of those hatcheries is probably deteriorated, and that's pretty much the best they can do. And again, as we've seen through inflation, the cost of everything going up, it's not easy. That filter, the bead filter we were talking about, and again, I'm not sure exactly what it does. It just makes it, improves the efficiency of the hatchery. I think that's all we really need to know. But the bead filter is $5,000, and that's for one hatchery. For one bead filter. If you get 2 of them, now you can produce twice as many. And again, I would go back and see if it would be possible for Joe Love to actually produce F1s on his own, or if that's some kind of proprietary thing they have in Florida going on. Yeah, you can't have them. Well, we'll sell them to you, one at a time, but we're not. Oh, I just flashed that jig again. But
we're getting there, guys. We're getting there.
Man, I love this jig too. Yeah.
Good question here from Victor again. Who would I contact if I wanted to donate to the stocking programs? This is a two-parter. And Victor, I'm glad you set me up with that. As you guys know, my Patreon supporters, when I hit 500 Patreon supporters, I am creating a 501c3 so we can do supplemental stocking. It will not just be the Tidal Potomac, but also smaller fisheries that don't get the TLC. So that's one long-term thing, because then I'll have full control and transparency to show you the books like I did. Like, this is how much we need to raise to do that. But as Steve said, there is a Black Bass Fund that we'll put a link to that in the episode description.
Okay, so you can donate to it. But does Victor want to donate fish, or does he want to donate to stocking fish? Because it sounds like he said does he raise fish? Is that what he does?
Yes, he does. So how would I contact if I wanted to donate stocked fish?
There you go.
Reach out to Joe Love. Yeah, I'll put his name because he would love to have his email just bombed over everywhere.
Yeah, put his email there. He loves it.
He does. Geez, a lot of snakehead haters out there. It's it's like the Redskins Cowboys, honestly. That's the kind of vibe they get. Do the snakeheads feed on tidal schedule like the bass do? I would assume so.
Yeah, what I found is that they do it. I mean, the reason that tides make fish feed is because it causes the bait fish to have to swim around. When you have a slack tide, everything stops, and fish aren't smart. They become conditioned. Whether if you're a predator fish, like, well, wait a minute, I don't see anything swimming around. Because there's no current. There's no reason they have to swim around, so they're stationary. It's kind of like you take your buddy hunting for the first time, and you go, look, the deer's over there, and they go, where? And all of a sudden, the deer, all it has to do is flick its tail just a little bit, and as the predator, you see that. So yeah, snakeheads do feed a lot better when the water is moving. Now, I like fishing for them at pretty much every tide but I like confined places. So the backs, like in Little Hunting Creek, there are 2 canals back there that I like to fish in for snakeheads. Also the back of Swan Creek, there are a couple little nooks back there that they're basically still waters. You could cover the whole thing. You can see the snakeheads usually, and you just keep peppering them. But there's almost no current. I like it when it's a little bit lower water, because it kind of forces them to have to come out a little bit away from the cover that I can't catch them in.
It is interesting. And guys, I'm going to have, because I see so many snakehead questions. Don't worry. I also have on the snakehead specific kayak club. I'll make sure I get all those snakehead questions answered as well. Everett, I'll get to your question in a minute. First of all, drum roll, please. I think you have a jig head.
So anytime that, I tinker a lot in my shop, and one of the first things I tinkered with, I did a seminar 20 years ago, I guess, when Senkos first came out. I was at the Timonium. No, not the Timonium show. The one in Richmond. It used to be called Bassarama. And I went there and I said, I need a catchy title for a seminar. So it was 10 ways to fish a Senko. So I was like coming up with all kinds of stuff. So I had come out with this kind of hook where it's just a wide gap hook with a molded 1/8 ounce head on there. Okay. And I had it rigged wacky. Right there. I hate these cameras.
Hold on. I'm gonna help you out here.
You are.
Give me 5 seconds. Boom.
Oh, look at that. Okay. So I rigged this thing wacky. It has a weed guard on it, but it's this lead head that adds the weight to it. Now, there are some now out there that do that. So I found that that has a different action. That's a straight fall and it wiggles on the way down. As it's going down, it wiggles. But I wanted something that would glide a little bit. I wanted more, most of the time with presentations, you either have a vertical or a horizontal. So the vertical is the natural Senko drop where it falls, whether you got the wacky rig or whatever you got. I wanted a horizontal. So even weightless, the Senko will fall horizontally. So what I said, I want it to fall a little bit faster, and I want it to have like a gliding motion, almost spiraling at some point. So what I came out with is I took a regular 4/0 offset worm hook. Okay. So a 3/0 offset worm hook. Let's see if we can see it better like that. And I molded in an 1/8 ounce head to this thing. When this thing falls, it not only glides, but it tends to spiral. And it works better than if you Texas rig, because when you Texas rig, you put the weight straight here and your action is vertical. I wanted it to be horizontal, so it glides. Now, it is a little bit weight forward, a little bit slightly weight forward. So it does fall a little bit of an angle, but it tends to glide instead of dropping straight down. This is a really cool thing to fish this time of the year because you don't work it like a worm where you got to shake it. It's called stroking. I don't know if you guys have seen that before with jigs in deep water, but just sort of lift it up, drop your slack line, and just let that thing it swims around and it glides, and it works really well in grass, it works really well under docks, and it works really well on wood cover. I found it works anywhere from 2 feet deep to, I was throwing it in a lake that I was fishing treetops that were in 20, 30 feet of water, and the fish were suspended about 6 feet down. So I would just drop this thing down and then pull it up and just let it spiral down. And I could see on my live scope. Am I allowed to say live scope?
Yeah, I don't think people get triggered here.
Okay, you don't get triggered. Okay, so on live scope, I could actually see fish follow it as it was spiraling down, and then they'd stop, and then I'd bring it back up and let it drop down again, and it would spiral on the way down. But that's a pretty cool thing. If you guys are hobbyists, that's just a regular ball head jig that you would make just a regular jig out of. You got to kind of finagle to get the hook in there right. You can only pour a couple at a time, maybe 1 or 2 at a time, but I do it for personal use, and I do not sell them, although I might sell some to Thomas. But
Aww.
that's a cool thing.
How is the river, and this gets asked to me and probably you a bunch too. You have 37 BFLs, the Toyota, the Potomac teams, the Battle of the Border. A lot has happened. How is the river fishing right now with all that abuse?
Well, you still have to be patient. You still have to work the same areas. I mean, everybody's fishing. I mean, that's the thing about the Potomac is that you only have a few places that you can really fish because it's a grass fishery. I remember, Takahiro told me, too much grass, no bass. No, well, sorry, the bass are in the grass, Taki. You got to fish the grass. And they're still there. You have to use other techniques sometimes. I know a lot of guys, and me included, we use a heavy drop shot where we'll have 20-pound test fluorocarbon on our 7-foot rod bait caster with a 1/4 ounce weight and a 6-inch worm and a 3/0 hook. And we'll pitch that in the holes because they do get pressured and they tend to be, and the Senko, they see a zillion Senkos. You can still trigger them with frogs, but punching becomes more prevalent this time of year because not many guys. Do you punch? Have you punched? Would you consider?
Yeah, I would say I dabble in it. I would not be a Floridian or yourself.
Right. And you fished a lot, and punching is the way to really get bigger fish from this point going forward. because of that. Because fish are now being so pressured, they're going to be in places that that other guys aren't going to try to fish. You know, they're out there. Hey, is there any place around without any grass? And I will give you quick tips on punching mats. The first tip is what I call the tennis ball pattern. So a tennis ball will be floating around the river, and all of a sudden it gets stopped in a grass bed. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for just thick grass. We're looking for places where the milfoil columns have trapped decaying stuff. Old grass, chopped up grass, dead fish, tennis ball pattern. Stuff just gets floated in there. There's a cavern underneath it. What's on the underside of that decaying grass and everything? It's crawfish. They're underneath there. And the bass is underneath that waiting for one of those crawfish to make a mistake, which is why frog fishing works so well, because the bass are keying on the underside of those mats. And when a frog goes across, creates a disturbance, and those fish will come up. They don't see the frog. They just see the disturbance on that thick grass. So when you're punching mats, look for that. It's better if you can find, if you find grass on a sunny day at a high tide. I like going in at high tide. A lot of guys, I want to go to low tide. Now low tide compresses it and it makes it harder. Now low tide, if you find some isolated mats away from the main grass, those can be good. But at high tide, lots of sun, let them get drawn underneath there, and then go ahead and punch through. And on your hook set, that's the last of the advice I'm going to give you on this, unless guys have questions. On the hook set, it's not a snap set. You're using an ounce to ounce and a half weight. If you try to snap set, it's just going to open their mouth and it's going to come flying back a tungsten weight at about 60 miles an hour. There goes your live scope screen. You ruin your day that way. So the hook set, you're going to feel that fish is going to pull it down, and you're going to put the butt of your rod in your ribs, and you're just going to lean back. And when you do that, you're going to pull the fish right into the bottom of that mat. He's going to get covered with grass, and you go, I got a good one. You're going to go over, start peeling the grass off, and the fish is going to go like, hey, I'm not tired. I didn't do anything. And it's going to jump. And most of them, they don't just spit. They don't spit lures on the Potomac. They throw them, and with a tight spiral. So it'll come back and it'll hit you. They're tough fish out there. But so work on that hook set. Presentation, just drop it on top of the mat, shake it, and when it drops through, watch it. Get a mental clock going. 1001, 1002, 1003, it should be on the bottom. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1000. Hey, can you grab my sandwich? 1008, 1009. Well, wait a minute. It's a fish swimming away with it. You should be setting the hook. So I love doing it.
We got a question on Instagram here from Nitty Alive, which is, can you have too heavy of braid?
Well, so I have changed on braid. When I first started using braid, I used 65 brown braid. And what I found was I could still cast it. It did well. And, for frog fishing especially, I said, it's great. And I really felt it was good stuff. That was when braid first came out, and we said, let's get the heaviest stuff we can get. Doesn't cast as well, okay? Also, it doesn't slice through the grass. So when you've got takes your bait down and you want to get that fish out of the grass, drop down to 50. If you've been comfortable with 65 or 60, drop to 50. I throw a lot of 40 now.
Wow.
I haven't had any problem. 40 pound, and it will slice through that grass when you're trying to pull fish out of it.
We got another question here on the old Instagram. Guys, if you would like, please move over to either Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. I can share your question. Instagram is the only platform that won't let me share the freaking question. Are the lily pads playing at all? I assume he meant spatterdock this time of year.
Yeah, and so spatterdock is really unique because everybody sees this as it's got great cover. Keep in mind, the Potomac is a tidal fishery. And, guys, for those who don't know what I do, I've been a guide for about 28 years. I fished the Potomac since the 80s, before anybody was really fishing for bass. So I kind of know the river pretty well. But top that off with also being an outdoor writer. I've written for Bassmaster, FLW, Bass Fan, Bassin Magazine, and I have interviewed and been on a boat with some of the best anywhere. And I loved fishing the pads, and I'd always fish the pads. And I go, when's the best time to fish the pads? Well, I started to learn that the best time to fish the pads is to be there at the last hour of incoming tide. And you have to stick it out until that tide starts to come out again, because those fish that have all moved in to the pads, as you say, they will start to come out, and that's when you want to fish it. You want to fish that in the back of Doe Creek on the south side. There are lots of pads in there. Broad Creek, if you go all the way in the back on the north side, the pads on the left side before you go into that real skinny creek. And don't go into that little skinny creek unless you really know what you're doing. But when that tide starts to come out, those fish position in the outside edge, tie on a jig, go with your braid or your fluorocarbon, and just have a field day with it. The trick is that bite is only going to be good for about an hour and a half of outgoing tide. And then those fish, they know that water's going to get real skinny and they're going to move out. What the pros have found and what they have to find is either another place upriver or downriver, upriver to follow the tide, to run the tide, or figure out where those fish that were in the pads where they were catching them, where they've gone to. And in Broad Creek, I figured that out, and I'll give you a little tip there too. Go to Google Earth, and you'll figure out a lot of these things.
Will the grass, and this will be the last, guys. I know we're running long here.
No, we're not. We're just getting started.
All right, cool. I just want to make sure. I know your phone's blowing up, and you're basically the celebrity of Virginia, Maryland. Will the grass ever come back to the upper part of the river? Like, is it a water quality issue, you think?
Okay, so again, somebody on Facebook was talking about this today. I think John Batters was talking about it. It could, but we'd have to have a lot of things happen. The problem that we have now is turbidity. So milfoil is a tall, laying, plant, and all of its foliage is up near the top. And it has to grow tall so it can reach sunlight. Well, as it's growing tall, it doesn't have much foliage down on the bottom because sunlight doesn't reach it, because the water is turbid, it's dirty, it's in the spring. And for that grass to survive, it's got to make it past April. And it's got to have enough of it come up that'll keep the water clear in that area so it can become dense enough to create a patch that will become clear enough so it'll keep propagating, cuttings and roots going out. Long answer to a short question. I hope it does, but my gosh, I've seen it almost come back in Broad Creek. I was telling Captain Chris today that I used to launch at Belhaven, and I would idle out to that big grass flat out there and just put the trolling motor down. And, one day I would go right, one day I would go left, and I could never go all the way around it. There were fish all the way around it. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. It was the only place on the river that was a mid-river grass bed. There are a lot of grass beds that come out from the shoreline, but this one was smack in the middle. You had the channel on the Virginia side, you had a false channel on the Maryland side, and you had this big, flat that was just full of grass, and that filtered the grass, filtered for the grass that was growing downriver. And when we saw it, during that bridge construction, that water was, they used to have a monitor there that we could see the turbidity in that part of the river. And it was like, I'd go out some days and go, my gosh, it's chocolate milk. But what we saw is the grass starting to go away because they started bridge construction, they started in that November. The following year, the grass came back. The year after that, the grass was gone. The year after that, the grass in Smoots was gone. The year after that, that bank from Smoots down to Broad Creek was gone. The year after that, then Broad Creek started to go away. Then Piscataway started to go away. Then Doug started to go away. The main river grass on the Virginia side down in front of Mount Vernon, it was gone. And so basically half the river, and that's what we're talking about with that punching technique, everybody's packed into like half the river. And because I fished it so much, and if you ever get the luxury to fish 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 days in a row, you really learn a lot, and you start to learn where the cover is. You start to go into the same spots over and over again. You use a lot of waypoints. You learn when to fish these spots. You learn where the fish leave and go to, and those kind of things. So without grass, you have to learn how to fish hard cover. If you're fishing hard cover, you're talking 5 bites and a big milk run if you're going to do well. Otherwise, join your buddies in the grass.
Steve, where can people find you? Can they book a trip with you, or are you basically booked until 2025?
Yeah, I'm not taking any new clients, but I do. I will hook you up with some of my associates if you like, and that's fine. I have a YouTube channel, and I try to break things down and try to approach them from a different standpoint than other people do. I think that you get so many videos where it's it's the money shot. It's like, boom, there's a fish. Boom, there's a fish. Yeah, I caught another one. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Where I'm talking, I'm saying, look, this is how I'm doing this. This is why I do it this way. This is what you need to look for. Guys, that's what I did for 28 years. I mean, I had people in the boat, 2 people in the boat with me all the time, 8 hours a day, saying, cast over here, do it this way, try this, and you learn. I learned what could go wrong. I learned that when I say don't cast over there, they're going to cast over there. Whether it's an osprey nest or a light bulb on a dock, they're going to hit it. So if you want to learn, my videos, like I said, are a little bit different. They're more of a how-to. And for guys who think you already know everything that I know, you'll learn how to teach your friends what I know that you know.
That's deep. That's really deep.
I know it is.
Steve, thank you so much. As always, guys, his stuff is already linked in the episode description. So whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, click that shit and subscribe to his channel. Help promote him. It's 2024. We need to bump his numbers up a little bit. Guys, check me out on Patreon. Again, as soon as I get 500 Patreon supporters, 501c3 is happening. We're going to have a nonprofit to help please supplementally stock. Try to buy his fish hook on the black market. He's got to have a couple there floating around there on the dark web. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.